The fall of the church and the rise of atheism by Ustad Nauman Ali Khan.
Christian history at large. So the Romans, I told you, had different religions, and there was a battle of ideas happening in the Roman Empire, especially after Isa alayhi salam, between people who believed in mythology, people who believed in philosophy, and people who believed in Isa alayhi salam. Okay, there's these three-way, ideological, intellectual wars happening. Now, a government of that time cannot have different religions operating, because again, religions, whatever the king's religion is supposed to be a show of loyalty to the king. So the king has to come down with a final verdict, which is the official doctrine. So between 5th and 6th century, the Roman Empire passes the verdict that the official version, the official religion of the state is Christianity as outlined by Paul. So the Pauline doctrine of Christianity became the official state religion. Which means if you want to show loyalty to the Roman Empire, you have to become a Pauline Christian. You have to accept Paul's doctrine of Christianity. By the way, even within the Christians, were there debates about who Jesus is? Is he God or not? Is he the Son of God or not? There were these debates, absolutely. But now those debates have to come to an end. And once this policy is declared, what does he do? He says all the philosophers and intellectuals need to be deported. He expelled them from the empire. Then he says anybody who disagrees with the official interpretation of the church is considered out of Islam, or out of Christianity rather. He's a murtad. And so he will be killed, and he will not even be buried. He's not even allowed to be buried. He'll be given the most humiliating death. In other words, no disagreements within Christianity are allowed. Then, once he got rid of internal debate, and he got rid of any intellectual criticism, he got rid of both of them, then he introduced the dogma. The Roman Empire introduces the dogma of Christianity. Dogma means you believe something without having to think about it. You just accept it for what it is, and that's it, right? And now, even if the dogma didn't make sense now, it doesn't have to make sense. You just have to accept it if you want to live. And what is that? Parts of it are 1 is 3 and 3 is 1. Part of that is God incarnated as a human being. The human being is God incarnate. God turned into Jesus. And that human being accepted humiliation and torture to save humanity from their sins. And so he accepted the cross, and God was killed, on the cross. And then on top of that, human beings now, their sins have been washed for, so long as they accept this doctrine, that their sins are no longer something they're responsible for. Now there's plenty of logical holes in these arguments, but that didn't matter anymore. None of that mattered. That became the official state doctrine. Okay. Now, beyond that, there were additional policies that you need to understand that were enforced. And the next policy was, what is true and what is false is not determined actually by the Bible. It's determined by the Pope. You don't have a right to read the Bible on your own. Later on, you'll learn, one of the last things is nobody can publish or even have a copy of the Bible. The Bible has to stay with the church. They will have the official copy. And they will be the only ones to discuss it and explain it. Because anybody else explaining it might get their own ideas. We can't have that. We can't have that. You guys know, much later there's a protest against this. And you want to be able to read the Bible for yourself. And that's the Protestant movement. It's literally a protest against, we should have access to the Bible. Okay? Now, the Pope is also considered, so the only one who can interpret the Bible is who? The Pope and the people he ordains. But what if they're wrong? What if they misinterpret it? That idea might come into somebody's head. Oh, no, don't worry about that, because the Pope is infallible. He doesn't make sin. He's perfect. Now, if you deny the rituals of the church, if you don't accept any of the practices of the church, you are also considered out of the faith, and therefore the only way to save your soul is to torture you to death. And then finally, the Pope has the license to forgive sins. So to this day, what will a Catholic do? Father, forgive me, for I have sinned. Not Allah, forgive me, for I have sinned. Father, forgive me, for I have sinned. They are going to forgive sin. They put that intermediary forever in between themselves and Allah. Now, the Romans imposed this religion, especially in Europe, right? And the intellectuals, remember what I told you about the intellectuals? What happened to them? They were expelled. They were deported. Guess where they got deported over the centuries? In the Muslim lands. And those same philosophical works that were burnt down in Europe were now being studied in Arabic in the Muslim lands. And so the same tradition, or the remnants of that tradition, survived and thrived in the Muslim world, in places like Andalus, in places like Baghdad. And then eventually, centuries later, it started trickling its way back into Europe. Philosophy started making its way back into Europe. And what do you find in the 16th, 17th centuries? You find a revolution taking place in Europe. We can't have the church rule us anymore. We've had enough of this. We need to revive reason again, philosophy again. But who preserved that for them, actually? It was the Muslim empire. It was the Muslim intellectual tradition. But anyway, now there's a revolution in Europe. We're fast forwarding now. And when this revolution happens, it is a direct result of what? Direct result of the Christian oppression, of the church's oppression. Once they get rid of the church, they say we can never have a religion rule us again. That only brought us misery, it brought us the dark ages, it brought us the kinds of oppression we can never allow again. We need to be a free-thinking society. So now secularism is born, and the purpose of secularism being so hard in Europe, so strong in Europe, is because they've tasted the poison of a repressive religious regime. It's understandable. It's totally understandable that they wouldn't want anything to do with religion on top anymore as a governing body. Because then too often there are human beings who speak on behalf of God and act like God themselves. We can't have that. We can't have these absolute authorities. So we need to have popularized democracy where we govern ourselves. We self-govern. But this is the political change. But there are intellectual changes. There's changes in the mindset of the European that we need to understand. And these are very, very important to understand. Up until the rule of the church, the most important people in the society were who? The Pope, the bishop. These religious authorities were directly connected with the kingdom. These were the most honored of society and the people you never question. Isn't that the case? But now that we're free from religion, so things that are associated with religion are not the most important anymore. Now we can decide for ourselves what is the most important. So here's a conversation that happens in Europe. We've been studying God for so long, theology for so long. What has that brought us? Nothing. We should focus our attention. God is big, but studying Him hasn't brought us anything. But the universe is also pretty big. And we haven't paid attention to the study and exploration of the universe. So instead of focusing our energies on the study of God and theology and philosophy, and metaphysics, let's study physics instead. Let's not focus on what we cannot see, a God. Let's focus on what we can see, the universe. Let's study physics and chemistry. And by the way, when they studied physics and chemistry, and when they studied the physical sciences, did they start making discoveries? Europe. They did. When you study something and you see results, it encourages you to do what? Study more and explore more because you're seeing results. And if you look at the last 1,000 years, studying God, what did that bring us? Nothing. Why should we go back? We need to replace, if you want to believe in a God, good for you. But what we're going to focus on as a society is science. What we're going to focus on is the discovery of this universe. By the way, is that still continuing? Absolutely. You want to have your religion? Fine. But if you really want to be successful, you need to study. And the scientific fields are the most respected fields in the world, even today. We're still tasting that same revolution to this day. As a matter of fact, even in the Muslim world, even in Muslim families, when a child says, I want to study Allah, I want to study Quran, I want to study Islamic history, I want to study Sharia, parents panic. What do you mean? What are you going to do? You need to be a successful person. I thought you were going to be a doctor. I thought you were going to be an engineer. There's nothing wrong with being a doctor and an engineer, but in our minds, if you really want success, what should you study? The physical universe. You'll notice even in the Muslim world, the scientific fields are the most glorified fields. They are the most glorified fields. And the fields that have to do with the deen are actually now, so what are you really going to do with your life? What are you really going to do? So now that's one shift that happened. The second shift that happened before this shift in emphasis, in a state and in a society that was governed by religion, it's all about saving your soul, isn't it? It's all about saving your soul. And as a matter of fact, even a lot of the oppression committed by the Christian rulers against people, torture, you know why they did it? To save their soul. Because the body's not important, the soul is more important. Suffer this torture now so you can be free from eternal damnation. So your soul may be saved. So they said, we've suffered enough with the study on emphasis on the soul. We don't even know if it exists. There's no scan that can show it. We've never seen it. We've never seen a soul. Forget the soul. Instead of the soul that somehow exists inside me, let me focus my attention on the study and exploration of the body. Let me study the mind. Let's study psychology instead. Let's study physiology instead. And when they studied psychology and they studied physiology, did they make discoveries? And when you make discoveries, what does it do? It encourages you. Let's keep going further. So now we're further away from an emphasis on the soul and further in on an emphasis on the body, psychology and physiology, right? Medicine. To the point where even if someone has a spiritual problem today, you can probably get some kind of a pill. Right? It's almost a complete denial of the soul. Even though hospitals will have a chapel, inside in America, a lot of hospitals, they have a chapel, a prayer chapel. And they have prayer services. And you know who they have them for? For terminally ill patients. Because now medicine has failed, now you can go back to your God. That's what it's for. A long time ago, I'm digressing, but this is important. A while ago, I read, this was when I was still in college, there was a Time magazine article on religion in the workplace. And the cover of Time magazine had a brother making salah on a musalla. Okay? And I was like, whoa, Muslims! In Time magazine, on the cover page. And then I read the article and I was like, oh. Religion is a good thing in the workplace because it makes sure that employees are honest and they work on time, they show up on time, and they don't lie and they don't cheat and they don't steal. In other words, we need religion because it's good for what? Business. Religion is like the garbage dump of society that removes the filth. It's the sanitation department of society now. It's not something you have as the highest thing. It's just there to eliminate problems. So the real focus should be on the body. Similarly, our religion included, we talk about the afterlife, don't we? Earn Jannah. What is dunya compared to Jannah? Nothing. But the Christians in Europe said, yeah, this heaven talk, I don't know when we're going to see heaven. We got problems where? Right now. So let's worry about fixing the political system, the economic system. Let's study sociology. Let's study urban development. Let's study city management. Let's study architecture. Let's study these things that will make this life better. So there are three shifts right now. God is replaced with the universe. The body, the soul is replaced with the body, a focus on the body. And then the afterlife is replaced with what? This life. And then the final one, the scariest one. When you had a religious doctrine, who decides what's right and wrong? The Pope does. Even if the Pope doesn't, okay, maybe the Bible does. Revelation will decide what is right and what is wrong. But now that we're free from the clutches of religion, we don't need anybody to tell us what is absolutely right and what is absolutely wrong. We should be able to figure that out for ourselves. We should figure that out for ourselves. So morality that used to be absolute, this is wrong. Now we don't need that anymore. Morality became relative. In other words, your right and wrong doesn't have to be the same as what? My right and wrong. That's your worldview, this is my worldview. And even as a society, there's some things that we considered wrong 20 years ago, but 10 years ago they became okay, and 10 years later they became awesome. You can celebrate them. Have you seen this in your own experience? Right? So morality is constantly shifting. You don't have a set definition for what is right and what is wrong. You don't need that anymore. By the way, where do you get set definitions for right and wrong? Through revelation. So this last shift from absolute morality to relative morality, you know what it's directly related to? The role of revelation replaced with the role of reason. You don't need revelation anymore. You can use your logic and come up with your own morals. Revelation is, unreasonable. Now notice these four shifts that I talked about. Notice how all of them go from something unseen to something seen. Did you notice that? Allah is in the unseen, the universe is in the seen. The soul is in the unseen, the body is in the seen. The afterlife is in the unseen, and this life is in the seen. Revelation comes from the unseen, its authenticity is in the unseen, its values are in the unseen, but the reasoning and logic and my own thinking is what? It's in the seen, it's now. In other words, there's a focus away from the ghaib.